In this episode, we speak with Derek Slager, the co-founder and CTO of Amperity, a customer data platform that helps brands build the unified first-party customer data foundation they need to grow revenue, reduce costs, save time, and stay compliant. Founded in 2016, Amperity's main drive in business is to enable larger consumer brands, such as Wyndham and Alaska Airlines, to develop and maintain a unified view of their customer using patented AI and ML methods. Now with more than 400 brands on their roster, Amperity is a trusted resource for turning data into business value. The company has raised over $180 million and is backed by HighSage Ventures, Tiger Global, Madrona, and others. Prior to Amperity, Derek was on the founding team at Appature and held engineering leadership positions at various business and consumer-facing startups, focusing on large-scale distributed systems and security. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to subscribe. Derek, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Great to be here. Thanks for the time.
So where I thought we would kick off is typically I ask, tell us about what the company does, et cetera. But I'm actually really curious, when you co-founded this company, it looked like you previously had some entrepreneurial experience, I guess mainstream tech experience. What was your goal, I guess, personally and professionally, when you decided to embark on Amperity?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, there's something about having done it before that both encourages you and discourages you from trying it again. So I think certainly I went in eyes wide open. I think from a personal perspective, certainly my goal was to scratch the itch, right? I think having done it before and then, having some experiences that were a little bit less entrepreneurial, I knew that was for me and I needed to do it again. So that was kind of the personal part of it, was just, as hard as it is, I miss all the things that are part of that experience. It's a visceral experience. And then professionally, look, we saw a big problem that we thought needed to be solved. And so we wanted to go and solve that. And we did that with the belief that if we solved that, it would be, really lucrative for us. And so, that's part of the reason you start a company, is to go and solve an unsolved problem in the world. So big picture, I would say those were the two pieces of it.
And how would you describe where you are today in terms of the company building journey? What phase are you in?
That's a good question. I think it is both easy and hard when you're on the entrepreneurial journey to sort of decide which arc you're on. It always kind of feels like you're at the intersection of what came before and the next arc. I think we're probably on, the third arc of the company, right? You've got your sort of first arc where you're just sort of, deep in the R&D. Are we going to be able to solve this problem? Is it going to work? And then you have kind of your initial kind of, go to market and trying to scale that. And I think, we've made enough progress on that I think it's largely, we're kind of at that intersection between the second and third arcs, which is, how do we go scale the heck out of this thing?
I like to go a little bit into people's backgrounds. We try to uncover, I think, aspects to the entrepreneur and the journey. When you were in high school or, in your formative years, did you show kind of this inclination towards being a self-starter, being an entrepreneur?
Boy, it's uncomfortable to go back that far. I'm old enough now that that's hitting the rewind button for a while. And I know what a rewind button sounds like. I'm also that old. So, it's a good question, right? There's that stereotype of the kind of, born entrepreneur who's got the lemonade stand. That wasn't me at all. I think I was, kind of a nerdy kid, didn't really like school that much, and certainly did like to be involved with things that, I think were closer to business building. I got really tired of high school and there was a program that we had that allowed me to go to college early. Eventually dropped out of college when I got a job at a .com startup. Didn't know at the time that I was joining a .com startup, but in retrospect, that was pretty clear. Had the whole journey there. And I just loved it. I just loved every second of it. The ambiguity, the, working as a team, the company building, the wins, it's just, that roller coaster was incredibly fulfilling for me. And so, at the time I was, of course, just, an employee on the journey, but I was in a very kind of entrepreneurial environment, and it was the most fun I'd ever had. And so I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And eventually kind of decided to try my hand at being a founder.
Yeah, would you say you're more driven by the act of doing what you're doing than eventual monetary gain?
Absolutely. I had a moment in that arc I was working for the .com startup. It was called Activate. It was while things were still going up and to the right. And, I did the math, and I think I was 19 years old at the time. And I was like, whoa, I have $1 million for $10. but actually those are real. Like, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm a millionaire. And then lost basically all of it. I think that ended up being less than $5,000 after everything came crashing down on the other side. And it was a weird thing to think. I remember sort of having this like meta reflection and being like, I'm a pretty young guy and I should be more angry about the fact that I just lost all this money, but I don't care. I'm still having the time of my life. And so I think that was like a very good life lesson that I was fortunate to learn early on, which is, hey, it's really about the journey. And, there've been some things that have worked and not worked as I've worked at various startups over the course of the years. But boy, it's never really altered the day-to-day experience. I just love doing it. And I've gotten to the point where there's been enough successes that that's really not the reason to do it anymore. And the exciting thing is you have a little bit of success separate from any monetary gain, it just earns you the right to solve harder and harder problems. And, I think I'm like a lot of people, I get bored with things after doing them for a while, but you can't get bored here. Everything is always moving forward. It's the most exciting thing you could do.
So that's a good segue into Amperity. Tell us a little bit about what Amperity does and the things that it's solving, the problems it's solving.
So we like to say that Amperity is the platform for customer data. That sort of intentionally sounds a little bit like customer data platform, but that category has become a little bit messy. So we try and speak to it in a way that emphasizes our differentiation. And really our differentiation is helping large B2C brands stitch together all their disparate data. Our average customer has in the neighborhood of 30 different systems containing customer data. And so obviously they want to have a unified view of customer, but that's challenging, right? You've got to find the connection in that signal across those 30 different systems. There's also duplication and bad data within each one of those systems. And so there's a lot of really sophisticated technical problems you have to solve in order to come up with that best possible view. And so we've focused really, really heavily on kind of that core unified data foundation problem to help customers, do a better job with everything from analytics to direct marketing to kind of better activation and paid media. The list goes on, right? All the reasons why somebody would want a unified view of customer benefit from having the best possible unified view of customer. And that's really what we set out to build at Amperity.
I had this question both in my own business as well as I was listening to another podcast, but sometimes you have these customer situations which are fairly complex and you always have the desire to go above and beyond for your customers and make them have an amazing experience. Have you found that there's been some of these maybe one-off situations that are pretty complicated where you've had to almost take a loss on the client engagement, or are you always able to kind of figure out how to make good margin on every situation?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the customer flywheel. I'm a big believer in sort of old-fashioned ideas, which is do right by your customers and it'll pay off down the line. So I absolutely don't get too worked up about situations where we might not have optimal margin in one particular situation. I want to be able to answer the question, hey, are we working together? Are we working together as partners? Am I doing my part? And yeah, I think, as I sort of reflect back and I think about examples of customers where sometimes the margins turn negative in a surprising way, those have been great learning opportunities. Because a lot of times when that happens, they're violating an assumption that you made in your business outside of the like very early cases where you're just giving everything you can because why would anyone else pay attention to you otherwise? But over time, somebody might use the system in a little bit different way. And it's like, oh, I didn't really contemplate that you might want each different feed, to be its own file, right? We just assumed that all of the files would be under one feed, like just these things that sort of seem trivial, but they violate your assumptions, and it allows you to go have the conversation, figure out what they're trying to do, and make the system better and smarter. So yeah, I think focusing on making customers happy, that's how you build your business, especially in a noisy space. We're in a very noisy space, and any opportunity you have to deliver truth for a customer is going to be your best way to cut through the noise.
Over the years, have you developed your own philosophy on what good leadership looks like? Or has it been more kind of intuitive? You act the way you act and it works out. People like collaborating with you.
That's a good question. Probably a better question for them than for me. But yeah, I've never been super intentional about it. I've read all the books you're supposed to read, and highlighted the sections you're supposed to highlight. But I don't know that out the other end of that, I've ever felt like I was a different person or had a different leadership style. I think Maybe it's a little bit different when you're in a technical chair like I am, being the CTO and co-founder here is maybe a little bit different than the CEO and co-founder. I think the way you lead and the types of people you lead and what they expect from you are all a little bit different. And so, yeah, I've always been somebody who really, really enjoys building technology. I love to kind of sit on my laptop and spend hours making something and watching it come to fruition, but it's not on its own satisfying enough, right? The real moments of joy are when you see that sort of in the world, you get sort of the reflection back from somebody who's used it. And so I've always really been attracted to building software for people. And it's somewhere in that space between being a passionate builder and really, really caring about customers and business outcomes that's allowed me, I think, to be helpful to people on both sides of that fence. And that has come somewhat naturally for me just because that's just kind of how I came out.
Mm-hmm. Are you from Seattle originally?
Yeah, I am. I'm from the greater Seattle area, which feels rare, right? A lot of people come here for technology, right? Where we've got, Amazon and Microsoft and some real tech behemoths here. And so many people come here. But yeah, I was one of those people who kind of grew up in the area and, it was a good place to stumble into tech.
How has that affected your ability with the companies you've worked with? And I guess most relevant is currently with Amperity. How has being in Seattle, do you think, altered the way the company has grown?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think being in Seattle, you have a lot of exposure to sort of the way things are done in Seattle, right? A lot of companies here are founded by people who worked for one of the big companies here at some point in their arc. And so I've never worked for Microsoft. I've never worked for Amazon, but I could tell you a lot about how Microsoft and Amazon work from my exposure to people who've worked there. And so in some sense, you've got a little bit of a sneak peek for some of the DNA of the people who come to Seattle or are attracted to Seattle. I think, if you think about the stereotypes of Seattle, it's rainy and cloudy all the time and people love to stay indoors and code all day. None of those are exactly as true as they seem from the outside, but there's a different person who's attracted to Seattle versus, say, somebody who's attracted to being in the middle of New York City or the Bay Area. And, that shows up. I think the average duration that somebody works for a company is quite a bit higher in Seattle than in San Francisco, for example. The dynamic is a little bit different here. And I think some of those things are useful to be steeped in, I think, if you're starting a company. And at the same time, I started the company without any of those direct experiences. And so having some of those exposures, I don't know, it gives you an interesting toolkit of things to put together, but you can do it your own way as well.
Obviously, it's helped in the retention. On average, it's 7 years. But what about on the recruiting side? There must be an ample talent in Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Seattle has a better tech scene than people, understand from the outside. I think if you were talking to some random person who said, "Hey, where do you think you would find startup talent?" They would probably default to the Bay Area. And a lot of times it takes them a while to be like, "Oh, Seattle? Isn't that where grunge people go?" But yeah, in large part because of the sort of tech anchors we have here, there is a pretty robust startup scene. And so that's really nice. I think it would be less nice if you were the only startup in town and everybody that you had to hire was coming directly from, Microsoft or Amazon or one of the larger companies around here, because there's a little bit of a deprogramming that has to happen to translate from massive scale to a more startup-like environment. That varies based on the person, that varies based on the specific experience they had at that company, but it is a big shift. And so, what's great is we've had a robust startup scene here for decades now, right? And so there's a lot of people who've had kind of that hybrid of experience, which is a growth stage company that's kind of in scale mode right now is really, really helpful, right? People who've been on both sides are able to kind of translate that kind of challenging thing where a growth stage startup is a really hard place to be because you have to both build things for scale and do things that don't scale. And it's never exactly clear which one you have to do. So people who have had the opportunity to flex both muscles can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of pieces of advice that you're always in two businesses. The one that you're currently in and you can see like near term goals being accomplished. And the other one is like the long term and ensuring that it is a durable business. Curious, what's the most challenging part to your business today that you're directly kind of working on?
Yeah, I kind of talked about us being in that third arc, and I think we're a little bit of a weird company in that I think the more typical startup story is, hey, we built some cool product and kind of made it easy to adopt. And then we realized, oh, in order to scale the company, we've got to go figure out enterprise. That's really hard. We're kind of the opposite of that. We sort of started directly in enterprise from the very early days of the company. And if you think about it, given the nature of the problem we solved, that sort of makes sense, right? The value of solving that unified customer data problem is bigger the more data you have. And so naturally you're going to gravitate towards larger customers. But also, in the 7+ years since we've started the company, there's more data and there's more data companies and there's more reasons to be a great data company. So as the market sort of expands, we're thinking, oh, okay, well, boy, how do we get to those customers that, don't go through an enterprise sales cycle? So we sort of have the reverse version of that problem. And it's a really exciting problem, right? In some sense, it's sort of like, you can kind of picture yourself going back to the very early days of that company, but we have this incredibly robust system because we've been building it for some of the largest companies in the world. And so it's a really neat place to be, to think about kind of how to take the things that are really working well and moving in the right direction on the enterprise model and sort of translating that to different kind of go-to-markets.
Now, I imagine you're still kind of, in some ways consumed by the work, although it's probably giving you energy given how you like to work on product. But what are some of the ways maybe outside of work that are good ways for you to, recharge? In some ways, I've heard of folks like that by doing other things, they're able to come up with better ideas that are just kind of coming from the subconscious. Are there kind of activities that you like engaging in outside of work?
Yeah, I think I'm learning to be one of those people who does things that's not work. And then I've had those moments of discovery over the past few years. Some of that is like, there's different life stages that you're in. I have young children. And so you're sort of forced out of your work mode in ways that are unfamiliar to me as certainly a bit of a workaholic classically. And so I am finding that, I don't know, sometimes when you're watching, 4-year-olds run around on a playground, there's some insights that will pop to you, and you don't necessarily always have to be working through the inbox or creating something on a digital screen. And so I think as I've had those moments, it's led to more moments. I exercise more than I did, once upon a time, because I find that those can be good ways to just get your brain into a different mode. And yeah, I think I discovered that late, right? I'm in my 40s now, and I don't think I really figured that out until pretty darn close to where I am right now. But yeah, I am finding that to be true, and being able to kind of make connections across those different domains. I think that's real.
I'm in my 40s as well. What's your definition of success?
Yeah, my definition of success is, from a personal perspective, I just want to enjoy every day, right? Like, people talk a lot about work-life balance, and it's always been my philosophy. I want to enjoy both a lot. And then if you get that line a little bit wrong, yeah, it's not so bad, right? So I want to enjoy every minute. That's my personal goal. From a company goal, I'm really proud of what we've done. I'm really proud of the people here and the software we've created. And I want to win the category, not again because I think that'll be a big sort of financial gain. I want to win the categories. I just think we deserve to, And so I have a real sense of mission on growing and scaling the company. And it's really just this obsession with winning and this obsession with solving a problem that I think deserves to be solved and still largely isn't solved. The vast majority of companies still would say today they don't have a unified view of customer. I just think that's totally unacceptable. Amperity's growth will correlate to more companies being able to say, yeah, we've got one of those. And that's highly motivating.
Well, you're sitting in a good spot today, founding this company and being a CTO and being on an upward trajectory. If there was one person you could thank for how they've helped you during any time in your life, who would that person be?
Oh my, that's tough to be able to choose one. I guess if I think about it in terms of the career arc, I'd probably have to call out CJ. CJ was the CTO, as I recall, and co-founder of the first company I went to work for. And there was no reason to hire me, just none. But I think there was something about my passion or naivety or both that resonated with CJ. And CJ said, let's give this guy a shot and let's set him up for success. And I absolutely wouldn't be here if I hadn't sort of stumbled on that opportunity. So CJ Johnson, circa 1997, giving me a shot. I've got to shout him out.
Awesome. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity cause or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Absolutely. I've been involved with, homelessness and housing programs in the greater Seattle area for a number of years. It's a problem in a lot of places right now. It's a problem here. And so, have been working with all sorts of different organizations that, build tent cities to help give people a safe place for transitional housing, working with people who build housing and working with the many organizations that help with kind of the life transitions. And it's been helpful to be closer to that problem, right? There's a bunch of misconceptions people have, I think, about homelessness. And, the first time I volunteered setting up at a homeless shelter, I was surprised to find that most people there had jobs, right? Like you went there in the morning to help set something up and then everyone went to work. I was like, wait a second, this is a homeless shelter. And so as I've just kind of gotten a deeper understanding of the nuance and the complexity of the issue, it's been something, and honestly, it's a growing challenge as well. And one that, I'm personally passionate about solving and also feel a little bit of a personal obligation to solve, right? There's so much opportunity to create wealth and create opportunity through technology and all these like incredibly leveraged things that we have the privilege of doing. And so I think, starting from the bottom in terms of giving back feels like a good place to spend my energy.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear and truly a need. So Derek, I think we're about out of time, and I do appreciate you spending this time with us. I know you're very busy, so I want to thank you. I know our audience will find this very insightful.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate the time and the conversation, RJ. Had a lot of fun.